Yeah. All right. Hey, I'm Dr. Jason Bradley, founder of Epic Functional Medicine and the developer of the Epic 5 plan. Today is Wednesday, January 13th, 2021, and this is Guerrilla Health Radio. I am so excited today. We have Dr. Gabe Roberts, founder of Back to Nature Lifestyle Medicine, a world-class functional medicine clinic in Kansas City. Dr. Gabe uses quantum integration to identify the root causes of disease and address how emotion impacts health, autoimmune disease, GI problems, cardiovascular health, chronic pain, mystery illnesses, and so much more. Dr. Gabe is widely known as the quantum chiropractor and as a subconscious healer. Dr. Gabe, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Dr. Jason. It's great to be here today.
Yeah, thank you for your time. You know, I want to just jump right in. You have a remarkable story of recovery from PTSD and chronic health issues that led you to doing what you do now, which is just amazing work. Can you share with our listeners your story and how you got into what you're doing?
Yes, I actually come from a pretty chaotic background, a lot of childhood abuse, alcohol-driven neglect, things like that. So by the time I was a teenager, I was on a real self-destruct path, hanging out with the wrong crowd, abusing a lot of drugs, and anything from cigarettes to methamphetamines. I had lots of experiments with, and hanging out with the wrong crowd to where I hit a breaking point, and I wasn't mentally strong enough to get away from it. So I made a drastic change. I actually joined the Marines, and for about 8 years, and that got me on a completely different path, but it didn't help the underlying problem. Fast forward, I got into health, I got into fitness, I was working out as a personal trainer, and then I came across chiropractic. The message of it really made a lot of sense to me. Wanting more than the actual college offered, I sought out functional medicine, which really did a number for healing my body, but my mind was still very chaotic below the surface. And it wasn't until I started to really explore the depths of myself where the answer lied on how to resolve it. And today I have no problems at all. And it's actually helped me with my clients a lot more. Learning about myself helped me help patients much more, because as a functional medicine practitioner, I noticed a pattern of people, when their body and their labs and their stealth infections perhaps, and their toxic loads were all reduced, there was still like an autopilot there that led to many of the people going on the path that led them to coming and seeing me in the first place. Once I started incorporating, subconscious techniques in, there was an overwhelming difference. The people became far more successful in all areas of their life, especially their health.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting. Just yesterday, I had a very deep discussion on something called the Wheel of Belief. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Wheel of Belief, but long story short, beliefs dictate thoughts. The belief dictates thoughts, dictates feelings, dictates actions, which get us results, which can reinforce that wheel. And I hear what you're saying. People just tend to be on that same loop all of the time, even when they're working hard to, balance out their labs, get their nutrition where it needs to be, working on diet and lifestyle, reducing those toxic environmental loads. It's still that same loop unless we're working on belief systems. So, which brings me to my next question. I sort of know the answer, but really I'd like to pretend I'm asking this for our listeners, which I am, but I'm really asking for myself. What the heck is quantum healing? What is quantum integration? Why are you called the quantum chiropractor?
So it's called quantum because it's not just a catchphrase. It's actually what we do. We actually tap into the energy fields using various techniques. I actually am a digital chiropractor, so my clients work with me through Zoom, and tapping into their field of energy or their spiritual side, which is their subconscious, I'm actually able to find what the priority is, whether it's, if they're fighting a cold, if they're fighting some kind of infection, if they're carrying some kind of emotional burden, perhaps from, an event maybe that occurred before, or their neck is out of place. And one thing I'd like to address is the scientific approach to this. I always come at things in a very scientific, logical way for people to understand that if this doesn't make sense to you, it's better to understand that we are indeed spiritual beings in physical bodies. We're not just a physical flesh, mechanistic, being. There's much more to us, and the evidence for this is quite overwhelming, although it's not mainstream. So tapping into this gives us a lot of answers that sometimes go beyond what we were actually able to test with labs, especially emotions. Lab tests can tell you a great amount of deal on nutritional load, on, the gut GI, sometimes even DNA analysis, things like that, which are some of the most cutting edge tests in the world, but they won't show where the burden is, why this person doesn't feel enough, or why they feel resentful, why they feel guilty, why they have shame. And oftentimes these people are walking around completely unaware of that themselves. But in my experience and in my opinion, from the research I found, this is the real root cause of illness, because microbes don't overgrow in people that are healthy, spiritually healthy, and people that are in a constant state of bliss, in a constant state of gratitude, in a constant state of, high emotions, high vibration. It's shown over and over that microbes, even Lyme, simply cannot overtake a host when that's going on. And that was kind of what I've noticed in functional medicine, working with people from all around the world. We had great results with them, but maybe within a year, 75% roughly were going on a track of getting the infections again. And this kind of troubled me, and thought, well, we got rid of everything, they should be doing better. But come to find out, it was the deep underlying emotions they were carrying in their subconscious. And once we targeted those, we used hypnotherapy, NLP techniques, and other reprogramming techniques of the subconscious. And then their way of their entire thinking changed, and they don't get ill anymore. So
I think that's super interesting. And it's funny, again, yesterday I was having this deep conversation on that wheel of belief. And we, as with one of my health coaches, and we decided the longer we do our work, we've been working, for just about the same time that you have, about 21 years on our end. And I said, the longer we do our work, the more I think that I don't like this word because it makes it sound like it's something hippy dippy, but almost metaphysical, philosophical, psychological, as much so as anything physically that we can measure, like you said, via those labs. One of the things that got brought up while you were just chatting just now with me is I'm always fascinated by this idea. This is such a weird sentence. I can't believe I'm going to say it. I'm fascinated by the idea of decomposition, specifically like body decomposition, that when people die, instantly our bodies start to decompose. That's how we can know, how long someone's been dead. We can look at the decomposition rate, and that's, medical examiners do that all day long. But those same microbes and enzymes that start to break our body down are present in the living structure as well. It's not like all of a sudden we die and we catch some microbes that start to break us down, so there's that vitalistic force that separates us from life and death. And I think that's really what you're talking about tapping into. Am I hearing you the right way?
Oh yes, I mean we're mostly microbial. Our physical being is, and if you just simply examine the makeup of the microbiome, which is far more than just a group of bacteria that we're led to believe, the microbiome is made of yeast, made of different components of fungus, different types of parasites, bacteria, and viruses. According to the CDC, about 85% of Americans have 6 different strains of herpes virus within them. But many of us don't experience cold sores. So the question comes, well, what are these viruses doing there? And why aren't everyone ill? I think it has a lot to do with our inner dialogue. Our subconscious is what controls our body. Our subconscious is what controls the vibration of our body. We have to understand we're vibrational beings. Everything vibrates. whether it's detectable to the senses or not. And if we're in a chaotic mindset, if we carry a lot of disempowering thoughts and beliefs, our vibration gets chaotic, our cellular matrix gets out of harmony, and then these opportunistic pathogens can begin to overgrow. And that's where we see a lot of people having illness. I'm a firm believer, and especially in the archives that I've explored of people that have spontaneous healing across the entire globe, and that we would call miracles. Everything starts in the mind. Are you familiar with Dr. Joe Dispenza?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, his work, he was actually able to heal from a severe spinal cord injury by tapping into that spiritual side of himself. And he's certainly not alone. There are vast numbers, hundreds of thousands of people across the world that have had spontaneous healings from completely debilitating disease by tapping into this spiritual side, letting their mindset, they take responsibility for mismanagement of emotions. And once they start getting clear with that, this healing force that's actually flowing through all of us kind of starts to take over, and then we see these so-called miracles happen. And it is important to point out that a majority of people aren't going to be able to do this on their own without intensive practice. I have told people about meditating for years, and many people just cannot. Their minds are busy. They don't have, the dedication to sit there and attach to that nothingness. And that's where things like hypnotherapy are very effective. The difference between hypnotherapy and meditation are basically impossible to determine by looking at the brain. But hypnosis has intention behind it. You can actually implant new programs into the subconscious, get rid of self-sabotaging beliefs, get rid of harbored emotions of deep underlying pain and things like that. And that's where the real healing starts to occur. That's where their body starts taking the nutritional support and everything much better.
I remember being in a conference a number of years ago with, the grandfather of functional medicine, Dr. Jeffrey Bland. And it was a room full of different types of doctors. And Dr. Bland said something very casually that if the average doctor is not addressing, he called it stress, but that mind connection to the body. But he said, if we're not addressing stress, and this was, I think, about 15, not maybe 20 years ago, but I would put it in that range, 15 to 20 years ago. If the average doctor is not addressing stress on every single visit, it should be considered malpractice. And you should have seen the uproar in the room, people slamming their tables and standing up and saying, that is not, my job. I am a real doctor. I don't have to, deal with the soft sciences. And then just a couple of years ago, the American Academy of Family Practice, of course, said that about 90% of illnesses have at least a stress component. And I think that you're nailing something that's very prescient right now in medicine, and yet still not practiced. I have a question. You brought up so many good points, and I'm going to try to unpack them in the time that we have. You mentioned that you tap into a field of energy, and I think, again, I know the answer to this. Is this something that can be learned? I know I was going to say, or are you gifted? I know that you're gifted. That's not the question. Were you given this gift of being able to tap into energy? Is this something that anybody can learn?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think we all have gifts, and I think we all have the ability to sense this field. Some of us are born a little bit more sensitive to it based on your background and your ethnics, and basically how clean your brain is. Someone that's susceptible to a lot of toxins are going to have a lot more difficulty. But with focus, I think anyone can feel this and tap into this. It's measurable, despite it not being mainstream. It has scientific evidence for it in terms such as, quantum field, quantum resonance, even things such as dowsing for water is just a demonstration of this field. Morphic resonance. Are you familiar with that?
Not at all.
Okay, so basically a doctor in Harvard, he began to measure rats, and I'll try to make this very brief. He measured rats to see if they could be passed, the intelligence could be passed down from parent to offspring, right? So he had this water maze that he put him in, and he began to count how many times it take for this rat to leave the correct exit on this water maze. There was one exit where it was the good one, where they would simply escape, or there was one that had a light and a mild electric shock. He was trying to determine how many times it took for the rat to only go out of the right exit. And it took around 200 tries before the rat completely caught on. The offspring of that rat took around 180. Then he took the offspring of those, and it got to about 140. So they got better. And it was, understood that maybe it was an epigenetic thing that was being passed down from, parent to offspring. Well, what's interesting is they started to reproduce this in Sydney, Australia. And when they did, they had the same species of rat and the same water maze and a completely different continent. But when they started testing those rats started at the same number that he left off in Harvard.
That's
so there's a number of studies that show there's a definite field that connects this. I mean, we can look at plants and give plants positive feedback or negative feedback, and they'll respond according to how they grow or how they wither away. So the question is, well, what are we saying to ourselves on a daily basis? And what are we saying to ourselves without us even knowing? Because you can look at things your name's Dr. Jason. I know my name's Dr. Gabe. We know we're doing this podcast. There's things we know we don't know, such as I know I don't speak Chinese, and I don't know how to fly an airplane. But what about the things we don't know? The intricate wiring that's within our subconscious that was formed as a child, that we get from our environment, that will limit us as adults and ultimately be the major determining factor in how healthy we are. That's why many people can't succeed in the goals they set. It might be health-wise, it might be financial-wise, it might be losing a certain amount of weight. It's because there's this hard wiring that doesn't like change. It doesn't like the unfamiliar, and it's terrified of that. And oftentimes the person will feel uncomfortable and they'll go back to their old self completely unconscious. So
super interesting. And it reminds me of that collective consciousness. And talking about things that we don't know that we don't know. Until you said the words morphic resonance, I didn't even know that was a thing, So now I have something that I'm going to be researching, which is great. So thank you for planting that seed, and I can't wait to see where it goes. So you've worked with, countless patients at this point from all around the world. Where do you see this is what I wrote down when you were talking. Where do you see the most common themes or the most common burdens that people are carrying? Or
without a doubt. Yeah, without a doubt. In all cases, autoimmune, whether it's chronic pain, whether it's, mystery illnesses, things like that, especially autoimmune, there's an underlying belief in their subconscious mind, without a doubt. The most common one is, I'm not enough. That one is maybe the umbrella term that will lead to many of these problems. I'm not enough. So, and that can escalate in several areas of their life, but deep down, underlying in their psyche, there's some kind of emotional turmoil that's causing this, and what that'll ultimately do is lead to our bodies being weak in some area. It'll lead to a weakened area of cellular matrix or a disharmony vibration. And that's where the microbial overgrowth can begin, that will cause like Hashimoto's or cause, irritable bowel or colitis or something like that. We always determine that it's the microbe that's the problem, especially in functional medicine. The microbial is not the problem, it's the overgrowth of it and why the host allowed that. So.
Well, I think it's interesting, we're still, after all these years, still debating germ theory versus host resistance theory, and I think I know which side of the coin both of us are on, So I have a question, and I'm not sure this is very pertinent, but just a question. How is something like quantum healing, quantum integration different than the work of Anthony William, who's that medical medium. I'm sure you're familiar with him, and at least his work. How is that? How is it different?
Well, I don't think it's that much different. I think that there's maybe some different terminology that is used, because when you're talking about the quantum, you're ultimately talking about what connects us, and the field that connects every living thing. And with that, there's endless possibilities, so if you're tapping into the quantum field, and you've what you only can do in a state of relaxation, total relaxation, and if you're giving your body the right instructions, it can actually go deep. Right now it might be easy for you to say, I'm healthy, I'm happy, I'm wise, but if you're not in that state where it can actually sink into the subconscious, it's not. Before too long, you'll have a critic in your mind telling you ways it's not possible, or why it's not there, or whatever else. So your mind will only do what you tell it to do. So what I always try to teach people and instill in them at a complete subconscious level is, only tell your mind amazing things, and really reject immediately out of your conscious mind anything that goes against that. And there's a lot of it out there. There's a lot of feedback out there that would tell us otherwise, but you have the ability to control your conscious mind and reject any idea that doesn't take you in the direction you want to go.
I couldn't agree more. I think I think that common theme of I am not enough, I hear that, played out so much. I work primarily with women, 35 to 65 years old, primarily with autoimmunities and primarily with thyroid autoimmunities. And I can't tell you how many of them at some point will say they just feel like they're not enough. And of course it's a chicken and egg story, right? They don't feel like because of their illness, they feel like they're not enough or good enough as a mother, as a spouse, as a worker, as a fill in the blank. And it's one of the toughest nuts to crack, to just convince folks that, you are enough, and you're beautiful the way that you are. Dr. Gabe, this is new for me. And again, I'd like to pretend that I'm asking this for my listeners, but I'm asking for myself as well. Can you walk us through what a quantum healing session looks like?
Pretty much like it sounds like, actually. What I will do is, if it's a new client, I always start with their mind, and I have a drawing of the mind, and what this is a way of bringing order to how their mind works. Let me give you an example of how this works completely different. I had a client come to me years ago. She's probably listening right now. And when she came in, she had tremors, like really bad tremors. And she had been on 3 different antidepressants for 30 years. So the tremors were the big thing she wanted us to take care of. The antidepressants that actually blocked her detox pathway. So her makeup was heavy metals. And that was what was causing her tremors. So we did lots of detoxing, lots of gut work. And then I did the typical functional medicine neurotransmitter stuff that she tested for very strongly. And the test came back and indicated she needed. And it did very little. It did very little for her. Once I began to incorporate this picture of the mind, how the conscious mind works, how the subconscious works, and do some targeted hypnotherapy on those areas of not feeling good enough, and having resentment for, someone, maybe an ex or a family member, her depression completely left 30 days, completely left within 30 days. And she's only gotten better since then. So I think bringing order to a person's mind on how their mind thinks is a big part of it, because otherwise they'll typically allow the garbage to go right back in from their environment.
Yeah, and I was going to say, speaking of bringing order to your mind, if I can just interject real fast on your behalf, you have a webinar coming up tomorrow. Is it tomorrow evening?
Yes, tomorrow evening.
What time is that?
It'll be 7:00.
And is that Central? Of course it's Central.
Yep.
So 7 p.m. Central tomorrow evening, free webinar on mastering your mind. The URL is elevateyourhealth.com/registration-page. Again, that's elevate UR for your elevateyourhealth.com/registration-page. guerrilla.com/registration-page. And I think that'd be great for folks to be able to join you. I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead, Dr. Gabe.
No, that's totally fine. And there'll be a free ebook they can download with that as well, so they can follow along. So it'll be loads of information on how the mind works and everything like that, and scientific backed tips for helping a person get control of their mind and start to change some of this dialogue. So the rest of your question was about how a quantum integration works. So that's the physical side. The other side is me actually through the screen tapping in and saying, okay, there's something in your adrenal, and I have different elements to look at, different sheets that have a whole bunch of different things. So I can essentially muscle test on my own to figure out where the problem lies and clear that out and see if there's an underlying emotion perhaps they don't know about. And through different interviews, I can find out where their thought process is coming from, where they'd like it to be, and then we know exactly what to target with their subconscious to give them long-lasting results. So there is some energies work, and I do work through the field. So the people usually right after a session, they feel completely different, even if they're in Canada or Puerto Rico or something else. So
super interesting stuff. And again, just kind of jumping through the hoops here. First of all, I'm going to try to make that webinar myself, and I'm hoping that our listeners will do the same. Again, it's elevateyourhealth.com/registration-page, mastering your mind. So here's a question. I hear what you're saying. We can measure, I guess is a good word to say this quantum field. We have the research done in morphic resonance. We have the research done in epigenetics. We know that stress and the mental status, I suppose, or the thought process certainly dictates, a lot of our health, our hormones, are just a function of our body. We know all these things. The WHO itself, the World Health Organization, says that health is a lot more than the mere absence of disease and infirmity. And yet, commonly in general medicine, we're really focused on diagnosis of a disease and treatment, usually treatment with a drug. Why, with all of this evidence that's out there and it being able to be measured and being researched and being studied, for quite a number of years at this point, decades at this point, why do you think we're still stuck in that name a disease and treat a disease? What do you think is going on there?
Well, I think it's profit based, but we're still stuck in this 19th century thinking of mechanistic medicine, to where, again, there's only two ways of looking at reality, Dr. Jason. We are either spiritual entities in physical bodies, or we're just physical flesh robots. And if we look at the spiritual side, there's really no limit to what we can do as a spiritual creature. Yeah. And this has been demonstrated with several people. I mean, look at Wim Hof. I think it's 25 world records. This man is able to put on a Speedo and swim under a glacier, which would really cause severe hypothermia in the average person, survive sub-zero temperatures. And then there's people in Ceylon, India that can walk on 1600 degree hot coals carrying children on their shoulders. Again, this demonstrates higher levels of consciousness, keeps your body doesn't overtake harm. So your physical body doesn't have a real limit to it when you're tapped into that spiritual side. The dominant view in all our universities today, and it certainly was at my chiropractic college, it certainly is in all medical science, all institutes, all governments, is the mechanistic, flesh robot view.
I love flesh robots, by the way. I want that to be like a punk band or something, but I love flesh robots. That's great. I'll be using that for sure. So I think that we've touched on this, but I just wanted to touch on it again. Our clinic sees, and just like your clinic, chronic illness, but a lot of autoimmunity, and it seems to be on the rise. I remember back when I started looking at autoimmunities 15, 20 years ago, and you found them when you were looking for them. But man, I tell my new private clients that the chances of them having an autoimmunity come up positive with the right laboratory testing is nearly at 100% just by being on a call with me. And I'm teasing, but I'm not really teasing. Why do you think that we're seeing autoimmunity and chronic disease on the rise? What do you think is going on?
Well, I think for one thing, whenever a person is not aware of this spiritual side, they're totally locked into a physical world and they react to everything going on outside of them. So that's more of the kind of where I see things and where my approach is. But another thing is our environment's completely changed. Since the mid 90s, our agriculture has completely changed to where we're using 350 million pounds of Roundup a year on crops. And this has a water soluble component. This is the most frightening. Now I could go on and on and on, but the most frightening one that sticks out for this is that we're using this water soluble antibiotic known as glyphosate. It has 6 or 7 patents on it for an antimicrobial, and it's water soluble. So as I mentioned earlier, we're microbial beings. When you have a water soluble antibiotic introduced into the environment, it goes everywhere. It's in our tap water. 75% of our rain is estimated to have it. So we are all exposed to this antimicrobial, and it's also a mineral chelator. So our soil is dead of minerals. And whenever you come across a mineral chelator, it stops zinc, magnesium, yttrium, manganese, all these very important minerals. It blocks them from being able to function. And you have to have zinc for testosterone production. So we're seeing a problem with that. And many other areas. We have to have zinc for hormonal balance, endocrine. But really important is you have to have zinc for hydrochloric acid. And if you don't have stomach acid, you don't have digestion. You don't have digestion. That's the bread and butter of all autoimmunity is gut, and so many things in our environment has changed and making people more and more ill.
Absolutely. And one of the things that's changed in our environment is the exposure to new and novel viruses. There's one that's out there right now that's getting a lot of press. Maybe you've heard of it. It's called COVID-19. And I'm teasing just a little bit. Tell me how quantum integration can be part of the solution to the very complex puzzle of COVID-19.
So the main thing is, if I sat here and talked to all the listeners about a lemon, I had them close their eyes and I start talking about a beautiful bright yellow lemon that you could just feel in your hand and actually cut into, you'll notice that your mouth starts to kind of salivate a little bit, demonstrating our bodies respond to what's going on with our mind. So if we are constantly hearing about this virus and we're constantly, hearing the stories of it, again, how many viruses are on planet Earth? 10 to the 31 power. That's the best estimated number. So that's a gigantic number. We don't even have a name for that. 10 million times more than the stars in our galaxy.
Wow.
Okay. It's how many viruses are on us all around us all the time. And whenever we constantly hear about these as being a problem, well, that's going to make your body react the same way it did to the lemon. So the best thing to do is just feed your body good knowledge and constantly reinforce that my body's healthy, my body functions perfectly, my immune system is strong, I'm in harmonious balance with nature. If you say that, 50 times an hour, this might sound silly to some people, but I see in my clinic and my patients powerful results by just doing this. And again, what's another way of demonstrating this? Look at what Dr. Joe Dispenza did. Now, he's someone here in the US that we can actually see those results with right away. We can see someone who got hit by a car, paralyzed, had shattered vertebrae, was paralyzed. But using these same exact techniques, tapping into that quantum field, made it to where the man has no symptoms today. So, having our body empowered against a microbial virus right now should be a piece of cake if we're practicing those kind of thinking every day.
It's super, super interesting. And I was just looking up a number to make sure I had it right. But it reminds me of a couple of things like that you said. It's kind of like we hear about viruses all the time and it starts to manifest into our reality and become more of a consciousness. It's like if I say, no matter what, Dr. Gabe, don't think of an elephant. No matter what you do, don't think of an elephant, you know, and of course, all that we're all thinking about right now is an elephant, right? Because that's just the way the human mind works. And it's just interesting that way. I was
You'll catch, I didn't mean to cut you off, but
oh, you're fine.
I go into depths of this in my webinar on Mastering Your Mind, how the subconscious mind works and how it doesn't process negativity very well. So if we say, I'm not going to catch that cold, I don't want to get that virus, I don't want to get that, all your subconscious hears is the virus, the cold.
Right.
But if you don't even mention that in the words, if you say my body's harmonious and healing and everything else, it leaves in a completely different imprint on the subconscious mind.
And that's what I was going to say, that it's interesting because we were talking about saying something, I think you said 50 times an hour or something like that. There's been some studies done on this concept, and I'm going to start in a really strange place, but with rosary beads. But there's 108 beads on a rosary, right? And they've done studies where, and I'm not picking on anything here, but we could say anything, basically what they've said 108 times, over and over and over and over and over again. And it doesn't matter if it's the rosary, it doesn't matter if it's, you know, I'm in harmony with nature, you know, I'm a healthy being, but it does start to change our physiology. We start to see this in the scientific literature where we do say things, what we're saying to ourselves over and over again begins to manifest in very interesting ways. You know, Candace Pert was doing some of this work in Molecules of Emotion. And I'm sure that you're very familiar with that work. It's, you know, 10, 15 years old at this point, but I mean, this isn't a new concept. This isn't something that came out yesterday. This is stuff that people have been researching for a very long time, but again, it just hasn't made its way into, you know, mainstream medicine. So coming back to, you know, and you know, thank you, by the way, we went over, we usually go about half an hour. We're at about 40 minutes right now. So thank you for your time. I greatly appreciate it. If you had to leave our listeners with one thing other than go to your webinar, which I'll promote again, elevateyourhealth.com, elevateyourhealth.com/registration-page. What would you leave with our listeners? What's one thing that they can do to change these subconscious patterns?
Well, this will be a 30-minute webinar tomorrow. I'll be doing a lot more, sharing basically the secrets that I have found over the last several years of exploring the mind. If they go to Dr. Gabe Roberts on Facebook and just like it or follow it, I'll be exploring these every month and sharing these scientific findings for the spirit. And you're absolutely right, the rosemary beads, but also there's been cases of people going and seeing saints, and they pick up bones of saints and they say a healing prayer, and later on the bones are analyzed and actually dog bones. They were replaced. A healing still occurred though. The same thing can happen with a placebo. It all has to do with your mind.
That's super interesting.
So the best thing for our listeners today to stimulate their immune system would be just say, you know, divine harmonious vibration courses through my body. Okay. You can say, my body is in tune with nature on a molecular scale. And if you write this on a card or you write this on a sticky note and you carry this everywhere with you and you review it often enough, it might even seem silly at first. It might even feel like it's a lie, especially if someone does have immune problems. And I got to apologize. My son's kind of coming in my window here, so I'm trying to avoid this. But if
you're glowing, Dr. Gabe, is what it is. You're glowing, you know.
Only in these little certain spots here, you know, very specific. But if you say something like that long enough, if you repeat that over and over again, you'll start to believe it. And next thing you know, you'll start feeling better. But what's a typical person do? They wake up, they say, oh, my knee hurts again. You know, if they wake up in the morning and their knee is not hurting, they say, where's my knee pain? There it is, right on cue. Mm-hmm. So, you know, feed your mind powerful, good stuff, and you'll be amazed at what starts to happen. Your mind only does what you tell it.
Divine harmonious vibrations course through my body. I've got a new meditation that I'm going to be working on, and I greatly appreciate it. Dr. Gabe, thank you so much for your time today. That was a very amazing conversation. Thank you so much. Again, you guys can follow Dr. Gabe Roberts on Facebook. Every month he's going to have, you know, tips of interacting with that subconscious mind and breaking some of those patterns. Tomorrow evening, Thursday, January 14th at 7:00 p.m. elevateyourhealth.com/registration-page. webinar on Mastering Your Mind, free webinar. I'll be there. I'm going to try to get my private clients there. Dr. Gabe, thank you again for your time.
My pleasure, Dr. Jason. Thank you. It's been great.
Thank you. And again, until next time, everybody stay safe, stay healthy, and stay happy. And I love you all. Take care.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So I'm going to end the live feed. Perfect. And stop.